Welcome to BIB 494, Difficult Passages in Biblical Theology. Thank you for putting up with the COVID protocols and doing today's discussion and Thursday's discussion online. What we're going to look at is this idea of the date of revelation. And as we've looked at the eschatological discourse, we've seen that the key question that we have to decide is it about the destruction of the temple in 70 AD, or is it about the end of the world? Is it somehow a mixture of the two? When we come to the date of Revelation, if the book was written in the early date, that is pre-70, then the idea that much, if not most of it, is about the destruction in 70 AD, that becomes a very powerful argument. If it's a later date, then that kind of connection doesn't really hold much weight. And so what we're going to look at will be that particular issue. As we come today, please take attendance quiz 14 once you've watched this video, and that way I'll be able to give you the attendance points for today. So what are we going to look at today? Well, how do I understand the book of Revelation? Is it about the destruction of the temple? Is it about the end of the world? Is it somehow about both? And when we come, the key question will be, was it written pre-70 or 96? If it's written in 96, then the connection with the destruction of the temple is very small. If it's pre-70, then that argument becomes very powerful. So let's dive in. And so what I wanted to do is just to start with kind of an independent witness. And so this is from the Catholic Study Bible. It's not pro-dispensational, anti-dispensational, pro-reformed, anti-reformed. It's just an independent witness of Christian tradition. And this is what the Catholic Study Bible would say about this debate. No background information is more critical to the interpretation of Revelation than the date when the book was written. After all, much of its meaning is determined by the historical events and circumstances that John purports to explain. For the most part, and I think this is a pretty fair history of interpretation statement, for the most part, ancient and modern scholars are divided between two alternatives. A clear majority, so I would say the overwhelming modern majority, dates the book to the mid-90s, so the first century. However, a significant minority date it to the late 60s. So this is kind of like one of those interpretive issues, Arminianism, Calvinism. There are going to be a lot of people on one side, a lot of people on the other side. Who do you follow? So here's an independent witness saying, look, there's people who follow both sides. The significant majority is in the date in the mid-90s. The note continues, the majority dates Revelation near the end of the Emperor Domitian's reign. So we will call this the Domitianic date. Support for this is attested by ancient writers, including Irenaeus. So he was a church father. He wrote a book against heresies. Really is a key figure, saved the church from Gnosticism that had made great inroads into Christian teaching. So he's a very well-respected scholar. Victorinus, who wrote an early commentary on Revelation, and Jerome, the man who translated the Vulgate. So all adopt a Domitianic date. Most modern scholars support this view. So if you just, got 100 commentaries on Revelation, the vast majority would side with the Messianic view. And it as well would explain the symbolism of the book in terms of Christianity's life and death struggle with imperial Rome. So the great whore of Babylon is the ruler of the then world, just like Babylon was once the ruler of the world. It would be Rome. The demise of the harlot city then in Revelation 17:18 is God's judgment on pagan Rome. The minority view dates Revelation near the end of the reign of Nero, or shortly thereafter, sometime maybe 67, maybe shortly after 67. Ancient testimony to this day comes from the titles of the Syriac version of Revelation. So Syriac is a dialect of Aramaic, and they had a translation and had notes, and so those study notes would say this was written in Nero's reign. And that John received it after he was sent to the Isle of Patmos, a prison colony there just outside of the harbor in Ephesus. Andreas of Caesarea wrote an early commentary on Revelation, takes the view, and several scholars in his day dated and interpreted the book of Revelation to that early period. So what is the argument for the early date? So in terms of whether this is about the destruction in 70 AD or not is completely tied up with this idea of date. If you can make a case for the early date, then much of the symbolism is going to be connected with the 70 AD. If you can't make that argument, then it becomes a moot point. So what is the argument for an early date for Revelation? And again, just truth in advertising. I've entertained a lot of different views over the years. I come down with the minority view here. I've been persuaded by some of these arguments, but I want you to be a Berean. I want you to look at the best case that can be made and for the early date, and I want you to answer for yourself. Is that true or is it not true? But these, I think, would be the main arguments from anyone that you interviewed from that minority view of the earlier date. So what are the arguments? Well, one would be that the beginning and end of the book says this is what must shortly take place. That's a very odd statement if the vast majority of Revelation isn't about something that was going to happen very quickly. Second, the great whore, and if you interpret that, the great adulteress, versus the virgin bride, you have apostate Judaism versus Christianity, the people who have stepped away from believing what God wanted them to believe, and then you've got those who believe what God wants to be believed. The encouragement is to those who are persecuted by Jews. After 70 AD, the Jews didn't persecute anybody. They were hanging on for dear life. If Revelation isn't about the destruction of Jerusalem, then you have what is the greatest crime in human history, apostate people rejecting Christ and crucifying him without one word being said in judgment on that. That seems very strange. There's fulfillment of the covenant curses in Deuteronomy. The message becomes the same to all persecuted people, that for a while God will let the persecution persist, but the day will come when he puts an end to that. And then we're going to see this argument about Nero and the beast. So what we're going to do today is basically look at the first three of these arguments. And so let's dive in. So the beginning and end of the book. This is how the book starts in Revelation 1:1. The revelation of Jesus Christ, which God gave him to show his servants the things that must soon take place. So if the book is written, say, in 67, this is talking about events that were going to happen in 3 years. And it happened. God said it would happen quickly, and it did happen quickly. If the Domitianic date is right, then everything from after about chapter 4 all the way to the end, none of that has happened yet. And so it's strange if the book says this is what must shortly take place, and in reality, it's 2,000 plus years. Continuing in verse 3, blessed is one who reads aloud the words of this prophecy. So you're going to be blessed if you read this prophecy. Blessed are those who hear, who keep what is written, for the time is near. Makes perfect sense if it's written in the late 60s and then the main event happens in 70. And look at the very end. So you've got both the beginning and the end saying, these words are trustworthy and true. The Lord, the God of the spirits of the prophets, has sent his angel to show his servant what must soon take place. So under a Neronian date, well, that's exactly what happened. He said, do not seal up the words of this prophecy of this book, for the time is near. So you have 4 verses that clearly say what's going on in this book is just fixing to happen. That seems strange if the vast majority of the book is still future to us. Now, if you compare that with Daniel, the visions of the evening and mornings that has been told is true, but seal up the vision, for it refers to many days from now. So biblically, there's a way to say, hey, this isn't going to happen for a long, long time. Revelation is saying the exact opposite of that. So it seems like that would be a little bit in favor of this earlier date, a Neronian date. And when you look at the phrase quickly, in quickness, that occurs 15 times in the Greek Bible and 5 times in the Apocrypha. And every single time it's used, with the possible exception of 1620, it means quickly, just normally quickly. So if we're just interpreting plain language use of the words, it would seem to favor interpreting it as something that would take place very soon. David Chilton, who is a writer who favors the early date, he's written a book, Days of Vengeance, writes, therefore Revelation is not concerned with either the scope of world history. A lot of people take that view that the 7 churches are kind of 7 subsequent churches in church history, nor is it about the end of the world. That's going to be the standard futurist reading. But it is concerned with events that were near to John and his readers. As we will see throughout the commentary, the book of Revelation is a covenant lawsuit prophesying the outpouring of God's wrath on Jerusalem, on apostate Jerusalem. It's prophecy of the period known in Scripture as the last days, meaning the last days of the covenantal nation of Israel, the 40-year generation mentioned in Matthew 24 between the ascension of Christ and the fall of Jerusalem to the Romans. And so you can see that this issue of the date is tied up with the eschatological discourse and the question there, destruction in 70 AD or not. So, what are some of the arguments supporting this earlier date, this Neronian date? And this is just how I would put the evidence, this kind of things that have weighed on me as I've tried to work through. But one is this idea of the great whore being apostate Jerusalem. If the great whore is apostate Jerusalem, then the Neronian date would be pretty powerful. And so what is the evidence? So Revelation 17 says, "Then one of the seven angels who had the seven bowls came and said, 'Come, I will show you the judgment of the great prostitute,'" and this is the word porne. We get the word pornography from it. Pornography means writing about prostitutes. So the judgment of the great porne, the pornes, megales, the mega whore, if you will, the one sitting on many waters. So the question is, who is this mega whore? And is there any biblical clue to connecting? Well, how's this word porne used in the Greek Bible? And it turns out it's used a lot. And the question is it ever applied to apostate Jerusalem in the Greek Bible? And the answer is, it is applied to apostate Jerusalem. So in Isaiah 1:21, how the faithful city has become a whore. And so in Hebrew, look how the city, the believing city, has become a zona, a prostituting one. She was filled with justice, righteousness dwelled within her, but now murderers. This is clearly apostate Jerusalem. This is clearly a covenant lawsuit, and God is saying, because you've stepped away from the covenant, judgment is coming. That's how the word porne is used in the prophetic literature. Jeremiah 3:3, "Therefore showers have been withheld, the spring rain has not come, yet you have the forehead of a whore." The forehead of you has become the forehead of a whore. That same word, zona. You refuse to be ashamed. This is clearly talking about Jerusalem. Ezekiel 16, and the more I read the book of Revelation, the more I see that John is patterning his book on Ezekiel. You have the unfaithfulness, God prosecuting this covenant lawsuit. You have the new covenant, and then you have the city, the beautiful city measured. Well, that's exactly what John is doing in Revelation. It's clear that he loves Ezekiel, and he's trying to mimic Ezekiel. Well, notice that in this passage about God's faithful love to Jerusalem, in the middle of it, it says, "How sick is your heart, declares the Lord, because you did all these things." The deeds of whorish woman the deeds of a woman whoring. So if John is reading Ezekiel and mimicking Ezekiel, well, clearly Ezekiel is calling Jerusalem, unfaithful, apostate Jerusalem, this whorish woman. Same with Ezekiel 16:31. When you built your shrines at the head of every street, you made your high places in every square. You were not like a prostitute because you scorned payment. So it's like you weren't just a whorish woman. You actually paid other people, and using this same word, zona there. And this is Jerusalem. 16:35, on account of this, O whore, hear the word of the Lord. Therefore, O Zonah, hear the word of Yahweh. 23:43, then I said of her who was worn out by adultery, now they will continue to use her for a whore, even her. And what's important to see in Greek and in Hebrew is that it's equating this whoredom word with the word moikuo. And moikuo is the technical term for committing adultery. To commit, any kind of sexual sin can fall under this porneia, but moikeia and moikuo is only married people can commit that. To do that, you have to have been married and then unfaithful. And this is clearly connecting in both the Hebrew text. I think not off. I think that's mimicking the Ten Commandments. And then we've got our Zona word and her prostitution. So it's showing that porne is this subset of adultery. To the woman who is a porne, to the woman who is the whore, and this is clearly Jerusalem in the Old Testament. O woman, moi komine, O woman committing adultery, receiving strangers instead of a husband. So you've got the adultery word, and then you've got I don't see the zona word here, but this is 16. It's equating porne and moikuo words. So notice when it's talking about this mega whore, if you just had the prophets, the vast majority of those are going to say the whorish woman is Jerusalem. James, sometimes you wonder if you had a preacher like James, he's talking to Christians and he says, you adulterous people, love of the world is hatred toward God. Don't commit a spiritual adultery by loving the cosmos, because that's hatred toward God. And so this is going to be the argument. To commit adultery against someone, you must first be married to them. There are a lot of people in the world who are going to fornicate, today, but that has nothing to do with someone's marriage. The only one who can, commit adultery is someone who's married. And so the argument is, when was Rome ever married to God? there is someone who was married to God and who was unfaithful, and consistently in God's word, that was Jerusalem. And so if this mega whore is being presented as this whorish woman, it has to be Jerusalem, because Rome was never married to God. So people would say, but hang on, it says the great whore Babylon, and Babylon is obviously Rome. Well, this is the passage. This title was written on her forehead. And remember that passage in Ezekiel 16, I think, said, you have the forehead of a whore. So this is written on her forehead, mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of whores and of all abominations in the earth. The woman you saw is the great city that rules over the kings of the earth. And you say, well, that's Rome. The second angel followed and said, fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great, which made all the nations drink the madding wines of her adulteries. Okay. The great city split into three parts. The parts of in the cities of the nations clapped. God remembered Babylon the Great and gave her the cup filled with the wine of the fury of his wrath. And you say, well, that looks like Rome. Well, you look at 18:10, therefore they're terrified at her torment and stand far off and say, woe, woe, O great city. And in Greek, that's he polis, he megale, the city, the great one. Remember that. We're going to come back to it. In 1 hour your doom has come. Cry out, woe, woe, O great city, dressed in fine linen, purple, scarlet, glittering gold, precious stone, and pearls. Then the mighty angel picked up a boulder the size of a large millstone and threw it in the sea, and said with such violence, the great city, he polis, he megale, remember that, of Babylon will be thrown down, never to be found again. Well, then look at the first use of he polis, he megale. Their bodies will lie in the street of the great city, he polis, he megale, which is figuratively called Sodom, figuratively called Egypt, and then the most clear statement, where also their Lord was crucified. So, he polis, he megale, Sodom is Jerusalem. He polis, he megale, Egypt is Jerusalem. Why wouldn't he polis, he megale, the mega whore Babylon, be Jerusalem? How can you use the phrase, the city, the great one, same four words, same order, and have it mean two different things? It doesn't say a great city, it says the great city. The great city, which is figuratively called Sodom. The great city, which is figuratively called Egypt. The great city where their Lord was crucified. This is Jerusalem. And this is the first use of the phrase. And so doesn't that explain the rest of these, and particularly this thing about adulteries? And we should look up this. This is 14:8. Let me see if I can transition to this. If I can pull this off, this would be great. So what did we say? Revelation 14:8. Of her porneia. So it isn't the Moicheia word, but we've seen that porne is used of Jerusalem, and so it seems to me that's what's would be being done here. I've seen your abominations, your adulteries, your nayings, your lewd whorings. We should look up that one too. Jeremiah 13:27. Sorry, I'm kind of having too much fun with 13:27, was it? Yeah, of your porneas. So this is exactly the same word that's being used. Let's see if I can get back. Now, what in the world have I done? Okay, there we go. We'll transition. Good. And my cursor is working, everything great. I have seen your abominations, your adulteries, your nayings, your lewd whorings on the hills in the field. Woe to you, O Jerusalem! How long will it be before you are made clean? I forgot I took a picture of this, and so you do have the moikeia word there for adulteries. 17:15, the angel said to me, the waters that you saw where the prostitute is seating are peoples and multitudes, nations and languages. It was always God's intent that Jerusalem be a missionary entity to save the world by turning into the mega whore. That purpose was frustrated, and so she's being replaced by the virgin bride, those who are faithful to what God's revealed. Apostate Jerusalem, therefore, is the whore in the Old Testament, and therefore apostate Jerusalem is the mega whore in the New Testament. So that's I think it would be a fair statement that for those who hold the minority opinion, that's going to be a very powerful argument. I didn't really see maybe one place where the word porne is used of Tyre in the Old Testament, but everywhere else it's being used of Jerusalem. So the second argument is that the persecuting body, the main persecuting body, or a persecuting body in Revelation is the Jews. And after 70 AD, the Jews never persecuted anybody. The Jews were hanging on for dear life. But notice what it says, Revelation 2:9. I know your tribulation. And just want to look at that, Revelation 2:9, and we'll go here, Revelation 2:9. So this is that thlipsis word that we saw in the eschatological discourse. This is the tribulation word. I know your tribulation and your poverty, but you are rich. And I know the blasphemy from those who say they are Jews and are not. That is, Paul says it's not the person who's outwardly circumcised who's a Jew. The true Jew is the one who's circumcised of heart. He says it in Romans 2. And so let me just do the transition here. If they're Jews, and they're Jews who are persecuting one of these churches, well, that would strongly argue for a pre-70 date, at least in my opinion. In 96, the Jews are starting to write the Mishnah, because they're their celebration and rituals are being lost. They're not persecuting anyone at that point. Behold, I will make those of the synagogue of Satan. Notice this is a different church. This is 3:9. Who say that they are Jews and are not. Sorry, let me go back. Behold, I will make them come and bow down before your feet, and they will learn that I have loved you. They've said that God doesn't love Christians, and God is saying, I'm going to show that I do love you. And so when you come to these 7 churches, we've got Patmos here, this kind of penal colony where John is exiled. Church history says that John was the pastor of the church at Ephesus after Paul had been killed. And then you have these Smyrna, Perga, Thyatira, Philadelphia, Laodicea. Notice that all those are in the province of Asia. They're just one set of churches. And notice that Laodicea and the church at Colossae, notice they're just a few miles apart, but no mention is made of the church at Colossae. Why do you have these churches mentioned? Well, people say, well, it's, church history. You have a Orthodox church, and then you end up with the lukewarm church. Well, another idea is that this is the route the person took who delivered the letters. And these are 7 particular churches, 2 of which face a Jewish persecution. And God is saying, I have an encouraging message for you. This is the ESV Study Bible. And so this is what's going on. It isn't church history. It's just the letters being delivered. And, it didn't really affect the Colossian church. And so they don't get a letter. But these do. So I think what we're going to do is we'll end there. We've kind of seen some main arguments, but I don't want you to believe something because I happen to believe it. I want you to be a Berean. I want you to I want you to stand on your own 2 feet. If these arguments are weak, find the weakness and show why they aren't true. But if the arguments do stand, at least these first ones we've looked at today would be a pretty powerful reason to support an early date. So I really miss that we can't do this face-to-face. One day we aren't going to have masks anymore, or plexiglass barriers, or online lectures because of COVID, and I look forward to that day. That's going to be a great day. Until then, this is going to be a great second best journey. So be a Berean. Look at these arguments. Read through the book on your own and see if that makes sense to you or if a better argument can be made. Look forward to seeing you next time. I'm still in COVID. I did test negative today, so if I'm symptom-free, I can be back on campus on Friday. I hope that will happen. Until then, I'll see you. Thanks.